There's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
You like me right now. You like me.
Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted this.
Mom, I just want an Oscar.
I'm Connor Wold and welcome back to another episode of the Ultimate Oscar Showdown. And this week we are jumping into a new category, the Best Supporting Actor category, where I will tier rank the Best Supporting Actor winners from S tier all the way to D tier, starting off with the decade of the 2010s, then going off to the 2000s, 90s, 80s, 70s. And then when we're done that, we're going to go into our final category, the Best Supporting Actress tier rankings. Do that, and then next thing you know, we're going to be going into the old Oscar countdown and having a blast with that. You guys have been showing a lot of support for the series, commenting below, giving your thoughts, liking the video, so please do keep that up. It is really greatly appreciated, and I really want to build a great film community here on the channel, so please continue to do that. But without further ado, let's jump into this Best Supporting Actor category, starting off with the 2010s decade with our first acting winner here, Christian Bale in The Fighter, the 2010 winner. And Christian Bale is one of my favorite actors, so I'm glad that he has at least one Oscar, although in my mind he's deserving of at least a couple more. And I think some non-Bale fans may look at this as a typical Oscar bait kind of a performance, playing a sympathetic drug user, losing a bunch of weight, kind of a showy type of a performance. But I do think it is the best version of that, and that may be my viewpoint as Bale as an actor. But I do think the decision to lose all the weight and of course talk with that Boston accent and to be very jittery in his performance style is very serving to the words of the story. I mean, a lot of people don't really know who Dickie Eklund is, so they could have gone away, I think, of Christian Bale being normal weight or not as transformative. But the decision to do that, I think, is insightful into what Bale's trying to achieve. You see, Bale is not necessarily a movie star. I see him more so of a character actor. He's always transforming, always losing weight, gaining weight, putting on different accents, trying to be something different. And he is so good at that. He is perfect at transforming. You really do believe this is a struggling drug addict in this suburb of Boston. And I think why the weight is actually losing all this weight was actually instrumental in this performance style is because how important the physicality is to this movie, to this performance. Of course, he's a recovering drug addict, always sort of looking back to the past of the glory days, and because he's a crack addict, he's got this sort of jittery, unnerving kind of a pace and way he just sways and moves back and forth and always just shaking his leg. But it works well in terms of servicing the story as well, because when we see Mark Wahlberg's character Mickey, when we see his reaction to his brother coming into the boxing gym, for example, we understand the intense amount of weight and anxiousness that he feels because now he has to deal with his brother and he can't focus on just what he wants to do. So he's very successful in that in terms of helping us believe that this is, in terms of an honest, realistic performance, that this is someone who's battling with drug addiction. You don't think that's untrue for a second. So you got that element of physicality, but then you also have the sort of non-verbal relationship that he has with Mark Wahlberg's character, because they have this brotherly element. They don't often have these sort of deep, emotional, soliloquies back and forth. It is a different kind of physicality, but still a physical relationship of them in the gym, of them sort of moving back and forth, following each other, hugging. They're able to communicate their sort of brotherly love and their relationship through that way. So Bale constantly sort of helping to add to his performance, add to the dialogue through a complete and accurate understanding of the unnerving energy and the physicality that this character requires. So for me, it's one of the great performances from one of our great actors. So for me, it goes into the S tier. Then the 2011 winner, Christopher Plummer in Beginners, the Mike Mills movie, which was a movie I remember seeing at the time and enjoying, but sort of kind of forgetting about it a few years later. It hasn't been a movie that has necessarily stuck with me. And I think for a lot of people that is their approach and opinion with this movie. It is, I think, in the consciousness, the movie that got Christopher Plummer his Oscar, rather than being a really terrific movie in and of itself, in the same way Still Alice is known for being the movie that Julianne Moore got her Oscar for. And I will say I'm glad that Christopher Plummer does have an Oscar. He is a terrific actor who's always good in stuff. And unfortunately with this movie, we don't really get a lot with Plummer. You know, on the rewatch, I was surprised just how much I had forgotten about the movie, how it didn't stick with me, and even still, it's sort of fading away. But it was surprising just how much, you know, Ewan McGregor is very much the lead of the movie, and we have this whole romantic kind of a side plot. And the scenes that we do get with Plummer, he is so sort of slick and so cool, and the character itself is so presentative that we don't always get to the emotional core of the movie. Now, maybe that's the point of the movie, is that he's somewhat unknowing, but can still end up being kind of a frustrating bit of an experience, because we only have so many of these limited scenes with Plummer's character, and then the Plummer's approach to the character is to be so kind of cool and very hip and unwilling to truly, I think, talk about his emotions, that I ultimately struggled with emotionally connecting to that character, and therefore the performance and the moments didn't really stick with me the way I wanted them to. So for me, a little bit of a disappointing performance, a little bit of a disappointing win, so I'm going to have to put this one in the C tier. Then the 2012 winner, Christoph Waltz for Django Unchained, his second win coming after his breakout surprise win in 2009 with the other Tarantino movie, Inglourious Basterds, and I think his post-Oscar win career here was maybe a little bit more disappointing and maybe a little bit more reliant on how well suited he is for Tarantino's dialogue, but then maybe struggles in other situations. Still a terrific actor, but you know, when the Oscars give you a couple awards really early on in your sort of career, I think they are expecting a lot. But that being said, he is so well suited to Tarantino's dialogue, and I think is very well suited here as well. A little bit of a befuddling one, because I don't even think he's the best supporting actor in this movie. That being said, his approach to the character is well suited. I have some issues ultimately with the character, just because he seems less so as a person as he more so is a driver of the plot. He's not one of the main characters you sort of root for, nor is he one of the characters that you totally understand. He is sort of, in many ways, a supporting character, but not necessarily always a notable supporting character. But what he does do very well is that approach to the dialogue. He is very sort of competent in his approach to that Southern dialogue, and performative and theatrical in many ways, because he's trying to sell this lie. So truthfully, he's very good in the movie. He's just not one of the main people you think of coming out of the movie like, oh yeah, I really liked him, he was the standout. He's good, he's just not necessarily always super remarkable in my viewpoint for the movie. So it'll just go into the B tier. And then 2013 winner, Jared Leto for Dallas Buyers Club. And this was a movie I rewatched in anticipation for this series, because I hadn't seen it in over a decade. And I remember Jared Leto being good, but you know, I remember before I had rewatched the movie, trying to think back on what were those really dynamic moments. Was it necessary for a rewatch? And because I didn't really remember much about his performance, I decided to ultimately give it a rewatch. And unfortunately, my suspicions were kind of confirmed. When you rewatch the movie, it is so much, I think, of McConaughey's movie. His performance is the standout. And I think the interesting part about Leto's character is how his character evolves. The sort of arc that his character does take is interesting. I think people were moved by that. But on the second time rewatch, I was a little bit disappointed in how Leto approached the character. I didn't think he was bringing too much. You know, the interesting parts about the character are how the character evolves, what is being written. But when you think about the certain scenes that Leto's character is able to have, and that he doesn't always knock it out of the park, I mean, I think the elephant in the room is just that Leto probably wouldn't play this character if this movie was made today. But judging the performance as is, I still don't think Leto brought enough to the character to make it a standout performance. Not offensive in any way, but just kind of bland, and I actually think another performer could have brought more to the performance. So for me, it'll go into the C tier. And the 2014 winner, J.K. Simmons for Whiplash, an iconic performance despite not being 10 years old. Definitely will go down in the annals of film history, because we had this character actor in J.K. Simmons who everybody liked, but I don't think anybody really knew had this inside of him, playing an incredibly intense music teacher at this established Schaefer, New York Music Conservatory, in which he really, as a performer and as an actor, brings a lot of what I think is the fascinating parts of this character. Because as written, he is the intense, sort of insult-driven music teacher. You know, it's very much kind of the Arlie Ermy type performance in Full Metal Jacket, if you remember that movie. He was the drill sergeant, and Simmons is great at that, at delivering the insults, at bringing the intensity, at getting right in their faces and being serious and mean. But what's so fascinating about him as a character is not only because those are so intense and so powerful, which, I mean, that alone, I think, gets you the Oscar. But the stuff that I think is really, truly special is the other stuff, is the fact that we get to see him outside of the classroom, in which sometimes he has some kind of jovial scenes with him and Andrew. Or you see him have real passion when there's sort of a reunion later on in the film. We see the way he is so well expertly manipulating these people, and I think adds his performance style and the way he's able to modulate his performance. He's not just intense and serious all the time. He can be kind of truthfully or seemingly interested in his students' success. Now, whether or not that is for his own sort of power-tripping ego, and whether he manipulates and ridicules these people to better his own self, you know, is the debate of the movie. But I think that sort of manipulation, that ability to modulate his tones, is the complexities of the movie that make it so much more interesting, that adds so much more to what actually is written on the screen, which is always what you want an actor to do, is to take a great part and then add towards it. And I think his ability to be intense and serious, but also kind of funny and seemingly have a care for his student success, adds a lot of more to the themes of the movie of what does it mean to be a coach or to a mentor? What does it mean to be great at something? And what's the sacrifice that you have to make? All of those sort of themes I think are so interesting within the movie are communicated through Simmons' performance. So for me, an iconic performance and one of the best of the decade without a doubt. So for me, it'll go into the S tier. Then 2015, we have Mark Rylance for Bridge of Spies, and I think at the time this performance was slightly ridiculed, but it will not be ridiculed on this channel because I think Bridge of Spies is a terrific movie. Now, don't get me wrong, 2015 was a really important year for me for the Oscars when I really got into it. You know, 2016 was when I started covering it for this channel, Old Oscar Countdown. That was my first year. But 2015 was for the first year. I wasn't making videos, but I was definitely very much involved within predicting the Oscars and whatnot. And everyone thought Stallone was going to win for Creed, and I really love that Creed performance for Stallone. However, just because Rylance beat out Stallone in Creed doesn't mean that Rylance isn't deserving of the award, because he is really absolutely terrific in the movie, despite the shock at the time. And I think what's great about this performance is right from the very first frame of the film, we understand the movie's complexities as he's painting a portrait of himself, of course having the mirror in front of him and we see him look back and forth. Who was the real man? Who was the real Abel? Will we ever know? And that's the sort of alluring and interesting part of the movie, is that we don't know if he's a spy or not. But as the movie evolves, I don't think we really care. I don't think it really matters, because Rylance does bring a lot of humanity to him. He does bring a lot of sort of simplicity in the way he approaches his would it help kind of approach to the case. And he does so little, but that adds up to so much in being sort of silent and being stoic and just trying to participate and mind his own business in a way that we start to feel for this character, and we feel that, you know, whether or not those family members are fake actors or not, or whether he has a family at all, it doesn't matter, because every man deserves a fair trial, and so does this man. And when we're looking at him face to face, he probably does have a family that he wants to go back to. So we, as a basic decency, deserve to give him that right. I think Rylance's ability to be calm and to be humanistic and to just be as simple as possible adds so much to this performance. So without doubt, I think it's a great performance, and for me, we'll go into the A tier. Then the 2016 winner, Mahershala Ali from Moonlight, a two-time winner in this decade. We'll talk about him a little bit later as well. But in Moonlight here, this was, I think in many ways, his big breakout as a main, kind of a leading man, a big actor in today's Hollywood. Because, as a matter of fact, if you look at his career before Moonlight, it's pretty extensive, whether it be House of Cards or Curious Case of Benjamin Button. He's got a really extensive and underrated kind of an IMDb pre-Moonlight. But here with Moonlight, I think it adds another element to and sort of a jump in his skills in terms of having a movie that gives him a real integral part. And it's interesting because Moonlight's success as a Best Picture winner, but even as this supporting actor win here, almost doesn't make a lot of sense, because we oftentimes see these supporting roles who are essentially co-leads, like Mahershala Ali in Green Book, win, because they're often a lot of times just in the movie a lot. So when you think about the movie, you think about them. But Mahershala Ali is very clearly in 1/3 of this movie. Yet it's a testament to his performance that we think about him when we think about the movie, that we think about how much his performance style lingers throughout the movie. And I think what's great about this approach to the character is that he doesn't try to approach him as a scary drug dealer. He tries to approach him just as a mentor, as a sort of stoic, serious mentor. And we understand why Chiron looks up to this kid, just because he's just in this sort of staccato way of speaking, taking his time to really emphasize home the points that he's making, never looking directly at Chiron, to be too confrontational, always starting his eyes away, looking out into the distance. So he's great in the way of adding that sort of stoic wisdom type mentor relationship that he's able to do through his performance style. But then also I think he's able to do something that shows off his physical prowess. If you notice, his arms are always in front of him, or he's got his arms on the table, or he's got his arms on his knees. His shoulders and his arms are always in front of him. And what that does, the effect that creates, I think, is shows off the physical prowess and the dominance that Mahershala Ali as a presence brings, which I think only heightens that sort of mentor and that iconic status. He is seen and positioned in the movie almost as a hero, as someone we should pay attention to, as someone we should listen to, as someone we should lean into as well, because he's almost coming forward to us in the screen and portraying his dominance. So some smart physical attributes that he does there, smart things where he's never always looking directly at us, and that sort of slow staccato way of speaking. Really well-crafted performance for me, very terrific, and smart little choices from Ali that accentuate the character as written. So for me, it will go into the A tier. Then the 2017 winner, Sam Rockwell, for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And I talked about this on the Best Actress 2010s ranking video, where I saw this movie at TIFF, and then I didn't see it again until I rewatched it for this series. And in between those periods, I think it really got sort of rung through the Oscar take cycle. So it was interesting to see, with that new added viewpoint, what I had thought of the movie, because I saw it at TIFF. I saw it before any of these sort of big reactions that had come out. And while I think there's definitely some valid arguments within those moments, and it didn't help me rethink the way I sort of viewed the movie, what I think is important in terms of this video is to talk about the performance, because that's what we always try to do. We don't try to talk about who's supposed to win instead, or the context within what the movie does, because that's not necessarily what we're judging. We're judging the performance. We're judging how Rockwell's able to portray this character and what he's being asked to do, and how well he does what he's being asked to do, and what he brings to it. And I think Rockwell gives a solid performance here. I think he works definitely best as the sort of dim-witted, dumb cop. Rockwell's always had serious comedic chops, and he's excellent here at that. But then the interesting part, and the more controversial part of the movie, I think, is that sort of third act, empathy-driven, sympathy-driven shift within the story, where I think the movie wants you to start to care for this character. And I think you can have issues with the decision to do that, but in terms of Rockwell's approach and the filmmaking's approach to make this character more sympathetic, I think it's ultimately successful. I think that's a testament to Rockwell's performance, the fact that he's able to take a very unsympathetic character and quickly make him, at the very least, a little bit more sympathetic through his performance style. So he's very good, I think, and best at the comedic, kind of a dumb-witted cop stuff, and he's very funny there. And the empathetic stuff, I think he does enough to make us at least feel like we should be empathizing towards this person. Whether or not the sort of turn works is up to each individual person. But Rockwell, as a performer, I think does enough to help us convince that we should. So for an interesting third act twist, kind of emotional shifting, but also combined with the very funny parts of Rockwell in the first 2/3 of the movie, I think it's a solid performance. So for me, it will go into the B tier. Then the 2018 winner, Mahershala Ali for Green Book. I've talked about this movie already and defended this movie, so we won't go too into depth here, just because I think the movie's got a good heart and is very funny. And Mahershala Ali here has the kind of almost underappreciated performance, so it's fascinating to see him actually win the Oscar, just because he is the straight man to Viggo Mortensen's comedic performance. He is he does have his moments to shine, and when he does do them, he's very sort of sarcastic and funny and a little bit more dry and straight compared to Mortensen's over-the-top kind of bombastic performance style. So he's I've given him a lot of credit for having, I think, maybe more of an uninteresting comedic role within the movie, having to be a straight man, but doing so very well. And then in the movie's less successful moments where we have these big emotional scenes that don't always work, they work more than they probably should have because of Ollie's performance, because of the intensity and powerful approach that he has to this character. Even if you don't like the movie, I do think a lot of people enjoy this performance because of those really emotional scenes. You can see the technicality that he has with that performance and how well he's able to portray that. And then I also think the underrated part of the movie is him being a straight man. That's a secretly hard thing to do. You know, everyone likes Chris Farley and Tommy Boy. Nobody really likes David Spade. But as a performance style, it's always underrated. And I think Mahershala does a good job here, and we should celebrate that. So a solid performance, definitely necessary for the success of the film and for that dynamic duo style. So for me, it'll go into the B tier. And then finally, the 2019 winner, Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Brad Pitt's only Oscar. He's never been asked to be cooler in a film. Whether it be beating up Bruce Lee, winning fights, wearing sunglasses, having his shirt off. He's just asked to be cool and look cool, and he is great at doing that. For as much as Brad Pitt feels like a character actor and is good at some of those scenes, he also just is really good looking and really cool, and sometimes a movie that just demonstrates that and allows him to be that can be fun too. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this movie. I think there's always a lot of build-up that oftentimes leads to nothing, and there's a lot of sort of meandering within the film. That being said, I can't put that on Pitt's performance and his character because he's not asked to do that. Do we know much about this character? Not really. Do we really care that much about this character? I don't. Maybe people who enjoy this movie do, but I never have any sort of emotional connection to this character. He's just a sort of person that's there to be cool and to support the main character in DiCaprio's lead, Rick Dalton. So I fault him a bit because he doesn't give us a whole lot to make us feel like he's a real person, but ultimately he's not asked to do that. He's asked to look cool, and guess what? He looks cool. So in a very simplistic way, he achieves that, and I think it's a good enough performance. And I'm glad that it's his first Oscar, although I'm a little bit confused as to why it is. So for me, it'll go into the B tier. But that's about it, guys. Take a look at the list. The 2010s, the decade that I fell in love with the Oscars, so I have a lot of sort of warm feelings to some of these performances, but maybe a little bit less so than I thought. You know, I think the 2000s also got some really, really terrific performances, so I'm excited to do next week's episode too, for sure. But that's about it. Please comment below, let me know your thoughts on and your ranking on the videos. I'd love to hear that. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more videos. And that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.